As you settle into your bed tonight, perhaps adjusting your lamp or dimming your lights with a simple touch, let us journey back through the centuries. Back to a time when darkness was not merely the absence of light, but a vast, encompassing presence that shaped every aspect of human life. Tonight, we'll explore the gentle, flickering story of how humanity held back the night. From the first primitive flames to the final candle makers who watched electricity transform their world. This is a tale of quiet craftsmen, patient work, and the soft golden glow that illuminated countless generations of human stories. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine. Imagine a world where a single candle flame was precious, where the setting sun meant more than just the end of a workday, where families gathered not around screens, but around the warmth and light of a single, carefully tended flame. This was the world of our ancestors, and tonight we'll walk gently through their evenings, understanding how they lived, worked, and rested in the soft embrace of firelight. Long before recorded history, in caves that still bear the marks of ancient hands, our earliest ancestors made a discovery that would forever change the trajectory of human civilization: fire. But controlling fire for warmth was one thing. Learning to carry light, to create portable illumination, that was quite another matter entirely. Archaeological evidence suggests that as early as 70,000 years ago, humans were creating the first lamps. These were nothing more than hollow stones, filled with animal fat with a piece of moss or plant fiber acting as a wick. Picture, if you will, a small stone, no bigger than your palm, cradled carefully in prehistoric hands. The depression in its center holds rendered animal fat, perhaps from a mammoth or deer. A twist of dried grass floats in this fat, one end lit, creating a small one-time, steady flame that pushes back against the overwhelming darkness of an ice age night. These simple lamps were revolutionary. They meant that humans could venture deeper into caves, creating those magnificent paintings we still marvel at today. The famous cave paintings at Lascaux, with their prancing horses and powerful bulls, were created by the light of such simple lamps. Imagine the artist, working in the flickering shadows, holding the lamp in one hand while applying ochre and charcoal with the other. The animals on the wall would seem to move in the dancing light, coming alive in the darkness. As humans spread across the globe, they adapted their lighting to available materials. In the Arctic, the Inuit perfected the kulik, a crescent-shaped soapstone lamp that burned seal blubber. These lamps did more than provide light. They were the heart of the igloo, providing warmth, a means to dry clothing, and a way to melt ice for water. The tending of the kulik was traditionally women's work, and skilled lamp keepers could adjust the moss wick to burn steadily for hours, filling the ice house with a warm golden glow. In ancient Mesopotamia, as early as 4500 BCE, people were crafting more elaborate oil lamps from clay. These weren't merely functional, they were often beautiful, decorated with patterns and images. The pottery workshops of ancient Sumerian cities would produce thousands of these lamps, each one carefully shaped by hand, the clay smoothed and decorated before firing. The wealthy might have lamps with multiple wicks, creating a brighter light for their evening gatherings. As the civilization grew more complex, so did their relationships with artificial light. In ancient Egypt, the management of light became intertwined with religious and social practices. The great temples were designed to capture and channel sunlight in specific ways. But when darkness fell, hundreds of oil lamps would be lit in careful sequences. Picture the temple of Karnak at dusk. As Ra, the sun god, completed his journey across the sky, priests would begin the evening lighting ritual. Starting from the innermost sanctuary, they would light lamp after lamp, moving outward through the temple. Each lamp was filled with the finest olive oil, scented with myrrh or frankincense. The flames would reflect off the gold leaf that covered statues and walls, creating a warm, divine glow that must have seemed truly otherworldly to ancient worshippers. In the homes of ordinary Egyptians, lighting was more modest but no less important. A typical evening might see a family gathered around a single clay lamp, its flame providing just enough light for the mother to continue her weaving while the father told stories to the children. These lamps burned various oils. Olive oil for those who could afford it, but more often sesame oil or even fish oil, which gave off a distinctly unpleasant smell but provided precious light nonetheless. The ancient Greeks elevated the oil lamp to an art form. Greek potters created elaborate lamps decorated with scenes from mythology, daily life, and nature. The workshops of Athens produced millions of lamps, exported throughout the Mediterranean world. A typical Greek symposium. Evening gathering of men for philosophical discussion and wine would be lit by dozens of bronze lampstands, each holding a beautifully crafted lamp. But it was in ancient Rome where artificial lighting reached new heights of sophistication and scale. The Romans were perhaps the first civilization to attempt to conquer the night on a grand scale. The streets of Rome, at least the main thoroughfares, were required by law to be lit. Shop owners were responsible for maintaining lamps outside their premises, creating pools of light along the dark streets. Roman oil lamps were mass-produced in workshops using molds, making them affordable for almost everyone. A typical Roman insula or apartment building might house dozens of families, each with their collection of lamps. In the evening, the building would glow with hundreds of small flames, visible through windows and doorways. The wealthy had elaborate candelabras and lampstands, some made of bronze or even silver, that could hold multiple lamps. The Romans also pioneered the use of candles made from tallow, rendered animal fat. These were cheaper than oil lamps and didn't require a separate container. Roman candle makers, or candelarii, would set up shop in the markets, their stalls recognizable by the distinctive smell of rendering fat. The process was laborious. The fat had to be melted, strained of impurities, and then repeatedly dipped around a wick of twisted flax or hemp. With the fall of Rome, Europe entered what historians once called the Dark Ages. Though modern historians prefer the term early medieval period, yet in terms of artificial lighting, there was indeed a kind of darkness that descended. The sophisticated lighting systems of Rome fell into disrepair. The knowledge of glassmaking for lamp chimneys was largely lost. Cities shrank, and with them, the need for street lighting disappeared. In the medieval world, the relationship with darkness was fundamentally different from our own. When darkness fell and windows were shuttered, the darkness was complete and frightening for medieval people who worried about demons and other imaginary dangers, as well as real threats like thieves, fire, bad weather, war, famine, and plague. For most medieval peasants, artificial light was a precious commodity. A typical peasant family might own a single iron candlestick, passed down through generations. Candles were expensive. A pound of wax candles might cost as much as a laborer earned in a day. Instead, most people relied on rushlights. Rushes dipped in animal fat that would burn for perhaps 20 minutes. The making of rushlights was a communal activity, often done in late summer when the rushes were ready for harvest. Picture a group of village women and children walking to the marshy areas where rushes grew tall. They would gather great bundles, carrying them back to the village where they would be peeled, leaving just a thin strip of the outer skin to hold the soft pith together. These would then be dried in the sun, laid out on cottage roofs or hung from the eaves. When the cool evenings of autumn arrived, families would render their animal fat. Every scrap saved from cooking throughout the year. The dried rushes would be drawn through the hot fat repeatedly, building up layers. A skilled rushlight maker could create one that would burn steadily, providing just enough light to see by, though nothing like the bright illumination we're accustomed to. Monasteries, however, were islands of light in this darker world. In monasteries and cloisters, rising for prayers in the middle of the night was part of the cycle of prayer, thought to protect not only the religious community from demonic attacks, but also the surrounding parish. The monks had both the wealth and the need for better lighting. They required light for their prayers at matins, long before dawn, and for their work copying manuscripts. Monastic candle-making was elevated to high art. The monastery would keep bees, not for honey, though that was a valuable byproduct, but for wax. The process of making beeswax candles was almost meditative. The wax would be melted in great copper pots, heated over slow fires. The wicks, made from twisted linen, would be carefully prepared, each one exactly the right thickness for its intended candle. A monastic chandler might spend his entire life perfecting his craft. He would know exactly how hot the wax should be. Too hot, and it wouldn't adhere properly. Too cool, and the candles would be lumpy and burn unevenly. The dipping process required patience and precision. Each candle might require 30 or 40 dips, with cooling time between each one. The finished candles would be smooth, pale yellow, and would burn with a steady, smokeless flame that gave off a faint, sweet smell of honey. As medieval towns and cities began to grow again in the 11th and 12th centuries, specialized crafts emerged, organized into guilds. Among these, the Worshipful Company of Wax Chandlers and the Worshipful Company of Tallow Chandlers became powerful forces in urban life. These guilds didn't just regulate trade. They controlled quality, set prices, trained apprentices, and maintained the sacred duty of providing light. In London, the Tallow Chandlers' Hall, first built in the 14th century, was a centre of commerce and craft. Here, let us pause and imagine a typical day in the life of a master tallow chandler in medieval London. Perhaps in the year 1450, Master William rises before dawn. Ironically, in darkness, fumbling for his flint and steel to strike a light. His workshop is attached to his home, and the smell of tallow permeates everything. His wife has long since grown used to it, but visitors often wrinkle their noses. William doesn't notice anymore. To him, it's the smell of prosperity. His 2 apprentices are already up, stoking the fires under the great rendering pots. Today, they'll be making candles for the Merchant Tailors Company, who need 500 candles for their feast next week. The tallow arrived yesterday. Good quality beef fat from the Smithfield market. William inspects it carefully. The best candles come from the fat around the kidneys, which burns cleaner than other fats. The rendering process begins. The fat is chopped into small pieces and placed in the copper pots with a small amount of water. As it heats, the fat melts and impurities sink or rise to be skimmed off. The smell is pronounced. William's neighbours have long since given up complaining, but on hot summer days, the stench can be overwhelming. While the fat renders, William's apprentices prepare wicks. They take balls of cotton thread, expensive, imported from the Levant, and twist them together. The thickness must be exact. Too thin, and the candle will burn too quickly. Too thick, and it will smoke and sputter. William has been doing this for 30 years, and he can judge the proper thickness by feel alone. By midday, the tallow is ready. It has been strained through cloth to remove any remaining impurities, and now sits, clear and golden, in the dipping pots. The apprentices have set up the dipping frames, wooden structures that can hold dozens of wicks at once. The rhythmic work begins. Dip, lift, cool. Dip, lift, cool. Each dip adds a thin layer of tallow. The candles must be built up slowly, layer by layer. If dipped too quickly, the heat of the liquid tallow will melt the previous layers, and the workshop fills with a meditative rhythm. The soft splash of the dips, the creak of the wooden frames, the drip of excess tallow back into the pots. By evening, hundreds of candles hang from the drying racks. They're not the pure white of beeswax candles. Those are for churches and the very wealthy. These tallow candles are yellowish, and they'll smoke a bit when burned. But they'll provide good steady light for 6 hours or more, allowing London's merchants to keep their shops open after dark, extending the productive day. The Renaissance brought not just a rebirth of classical learning, but also innovations in the art and science of illumination. In the great cities of Italy, Florence, Venice, Rome, the control of light became a matter of both practical necessity and artistic expression. Consider Venice in the year 1500. The city that floated on water presented unique challenges for illumination. Open flames were particularly dangerous in a city built of wood, despite the surrounding water. The Venetian government passed strict laws about lighting. Each gondola was required to carry a lantern at night. Not just any lantern, but one approved by the guild, with glass panels to prevent the wind from extinguishing the flame or sparks from escaping. The glassmakers of Murano revolutionized lighting with their innovations. They created the first clear glass chimneys for oil lamps, which protected the flame from drafts while amplifying its light. A Murano glass lamp could provide 3 times the light of an open flame while using the same amount of oil. The workshops of Murano were themselves wonders of illumination, requiring precise lighting for the delicate work of glass blowing and decoration. In the palaces of Renaissance Italy, lighting became theatrical. The Palazzo Medici in Florence employed a small army of servants whose sole job was managing the lighting. Great chandeliers of bronze and crystal, holding dozens of candles, would be lowered on pulleys, lit and raised again to cast their light over elaborate dinners and festivities. Leonardo da Vinci, ever the innovator, designed several improvements to lighting systems. His notebooks contain sketches for oil lamps with adjustable wicks, allowing for precise control of the flame's brightness. He designed a system of mirrors to amplify and direct lamplight for his painting studio, allowing him to work on his masterpieces even after sunset. Though few of his lighting innovations were built during his lifetime, they showed a systematic approach to the problem of illumination that was centuries ahead of its time. The Renaissance also saw the emergence of the professional lamplighter as a distinct occupation in major cities. In Paris, the position of porte-falot, or torchbearer, was officially recognized in 1504. These men would carry paying customers through the dark streets, their torches or lanterns providing both light and a degree of protection from the criminals who haunted the nighttime city. Picture a Parisian street on a winter evening in 1550. Darkness falls by 4 o'clock. Shops close their shutters, and the streets empty of respectable folk. But life doesn't stop. A merchant, needing to visit his warehouse, sends a servant to fetch a porte-falot. The torchbearer arrives, his flame already lit, protected in an iron lantern with horn panels. Glass is still too expensive for such rough use. Together, they navigate the narrow streets. The torchbearer knows every alley, every dangerous corner. His light creates a moving pool of visibility in the ocean of darkness. Other flames appear and disappear. Another torchbearer with a client. A nobleman's servants carrying lanterns to light their master's way. The dim glow from a tavern's windows. The city at night is not dead, but it moves in these small islands of light, each one isolated from the others by walls of darkness. The 17th and 18th centuries marked the absolute pinnacle of the candlemaker's art. Before the Industrial Revolution would change everything, master chandlers in Europe's great cities created candles that were not merely functional but were works of art in themselves. In the Palace of Versailles under Louis XIV, the Sun King, the consumption of candles reached astronomical proportions. The Hall of Mirrors alone required over 3,000 candles for a single evening's entertainment. The palace employed a team of 40 men whose sole duty was the management of lighting. They would begin their work in the afternoon, preparing the thousands of candles, cleaning the chandeliers, trimming wicks. Let us follow one of these servants, Jean-Baptiste, through an evening's work in 1685. He begins at 3 in the afternoon. As the winter sun already grows weak, in the candle storage rooms, thousands of beeswax candles stand ready, sorted by size and quality. The finest, made from pure white wax, are reserved for the king's apartments. These have been bleached in the sun for weeks, turning the natural yellow beeswax to pristine white. Jean-Baptiste and his colleagues begin with the state apartments. Each chandelier must be lowered on its pulley system, each candle socket cleaned of the previous night's wax drippings. New candles are installed, each one precisely the same height. The wicks are trimmed to exactly 1/4 inch, too long and they'll smoke, too short and they won't light properly. By 5 o'clock, darkness has fallen and the lighting begins. Starting from the gallery, they move systematically through the palace. Each candle is lit from a master flame, carried on a special long-handled lighter. The choreography is precise. Teams of men moving through the rooms, their lighters dancing like fireflies, leaving behind them a growing constellation of flames. When fully lit, Versailles consumed nearly 1,000 pounds of wax per evening. The cost was staggering, more than the yearly income of 100 common labourers. But the effect was magical. Visitors wrote in awe of entering the Hall of Mirrors at night, with thousands of flames reflected infinitely in the mirrors, creating the illusion of a space that stretched forever, filled with golden stars. Meanwhile, colonial America saw a different relationship with light was developing. Candle making was primarily a domestic activity. The autumn slaughter of livestock provided tallow, and every farmwife was expected to know the art of candle making. In New England, the discovery that the berries of the bayberry bush could be boiled to produce a fragrant wax led to a uniquely American contribution to candle making. Martha Washington's household accounts from Mount Vernon provide a glimpse into domestic candle production. Each autumn, the plantation would produce its year's supply of candles. This was a major undertaking, requiring weeks of preparation. The enslaved workers would gather bayberries by the bushel. It took about 15 pounds of berries to make 1 pound of wax. The berries would be boiled in great copper kettles, the wax skimmed off as it rose to the surface. The candle-dipping days were social occasions. Neighbor women might gather to help, turning the tedious work into a social event. They would share gossip and news while maintaining the steady rhythm of dipping. By the end of the process, hundreds of candles would hang from the drying frames. Green-grey bayberry candles that would burn with a distinctive, pleasant scent, and pure white tallow candles for everyday use. In the 18th century, a new source of illumination emerged that would briefly create the brightest flames the world had yet seen. Whale oil. The sperm whale, in particular, provided a substance called spermaceti from an organ in its head. This waxy substance, when refined, produced the finest candles ever made. Smokeless, odorless, and burning with a bright white light. The whaling industry that grew around this demand for light was centered in New Bedford and Nantucket, Massachusetts. By 1770, over 300 whaling ships operated from American ports, each one gone for months or even years, hunting the great whales across all the world's oceans. Let us join a candle maker in New Bedford in 1840 at the height of the whaling era. Samuel Chase runs one of the town's dozen spermaceti candle factories. The process begins when a whaling ship returns to port, its hold filled with barrels of spermaceti. The raw substance looks like a crystalline, waxy mass, tinged pink with blood. In Samuel's factory, the spermaceti is first pressed to separate the liquid oil from the solid wax. The wax is then heated gently. Too much heat will discolor it, and filtered through wool cloth. This process is repeated several times until the wax is pure white and completely odorless. The candle-making process for spermaceti is more precise than for any other material. The wax must be at exactly the right temperature, 125 degrees Fahrenheit, when poured into the pewter molds. Samuel has learned through years of experience that even a few degrees difference will affect the crystal structure of the finished candle, changing how it burns. The finished spermaceti candles are remarkable. They burn at nearly twice the brightness of beeswax candles. They don't bend in summer heat or crack in winter cold. They can be stored for years without deteriorating. For the first time in human history, a reliable, bright, clean-burning light source was available, if you could afford it. A single spermaceti candle cost what a laborer might earn in a day. They were the light of choice for the wealthy, for important occasions, for precise work that required excellent illumination. The phrase "burning the midnight oil" comes from this era. when whale oil lamps allowed scholars and craftsmen to work late into the night with unprecedented clarity of vision. But this golden age of whaling and whale oil lighting was brief. By the 1850s, whale populations were already declining from overhunting. Ships had to sail farther, to more dangerous waters. The cost of whale oil rose higher and higher. The industry was already in decline when a discovery in Pennsylvania would change everything. The 1850s marked a turning point in the history of human illumination. Gas lighting, which had been experimental for decades, began to spread through major cities. But for most people, especially those in rural areas, candles and oil lamps remained the primary source of light. This was the last generation that would grow up in a world lit only by fire. Consider the childhood of Laura Ingalls Wilder, whose memoirs provide intimate details of lighting in rural 19th century America. In her family's log cabin in Wisconsin in the 1860s, artificial light was precious and carefully managed. Her mother would make candles twice a year, timing the process for cool weather when the tallow would harden properly. Laura describes the excitement of candle-making days. The molds, made of tin, would be polished until they shone. The wicks would be carefully threaded through each mold, pulled tight, and tied to sticks laid across the tops. The hot tallow, carefully rendered and cleaned, would be poured into the molds in one smooth motion. Too slow, and lines would show in the finished candles. The filled molds would be set in a cool place, and the children would be warned not to run or jump, as vibrations could cause the cooling candles to crack. For ordinary evening light, the Ingalls family used a Betty lamp, a simple iron dish with a wick holder, burning lard or grease. It gave just enough light for Ma to do her sewing and Pa to read aloud to the family. The children learned to value light, to never waste it. Going to bed meant going to bed. There was no reading by candlelight unless you were sick. Meanwhile, in the cities, the transition to gas was creating a divide between old and new. In London in 1860, a street might have gas lamps on the main thoroughfare, while the alleys and courts behind were still dark. The lamplighter became an iconic figure of the era, making his rounds at dusk with his long pole, reaching up to open the gas valve and light each lamp. The last generation of traditional chandlers watched their trade change and ultimately disappear. Thomas Motley, a master chandler in London, kept a diary in the 1860s that provides a poignant record of the craft's final days. He writes of orders declining, of fellow chandlers closing their shops, of the strange blue-white glare of gas lights that hurt his eyes, accustomed as they were to the warm yellow of candle flame. Yet even as gas and then electricity began their takeover, candles retained certain advantages. They were portable, required no installation of pipes or wires, and worked regardless of whether the gas company had pressure that day or the electrical plant was functioning. In rural areas especially, candles and oil lamps would remain the primary lighting well into the 20th century. As we drift deeper into the gentle history of light, let us pause to consider the flame itself. That small miracle of chemistry and physics that our ancestors regarded with something approaching reverence. For thousands of years, humans watched flames dance without truly understanding what they were seeing. A candle flame, when you examine it closely, is a remarkably complex phenomenon. The wick draws liquid wax upward through capillary action. The heat of the flame vaporizes this liquid, and it's actually the wax vapor that burns, not the wick itself. The flame has distinct zones: the dark area near the wick where vaporization occurs, the bright yellow region where carbon particles glow with heat, and the nearly invisible outer layer where the final combustion takes place. Medieval scholars had various theories about fire and flame. Some followed Aristotle in believing fire was one of the four basic elements. Alchemists thought flame was the release of phlogiston, a supposed fire element contained within all combustible materials. It wasn't until the late 18th century that Antoine Lavoisier correctly identified combustion as a chemical reaction involving oxygen. But perhaps our ancestors, lacking our scientific understanding, saw something we miss. They understood flame as a living thing. It consumed food, wax, oil, wood. It breathed, requiring air. It could be born from a parent flame. It could sicken and die. They saw in the flame a metaphor for life itself. Brief, fragile, requiring constant tending, but capable of bringing warmth and illumination to the darkness. The care of flame was an art passed down through generations. A good housewife knew how to read her candles. A flame that burned too tall meant the wick needed trimming. A flame that flickered warned of draughts that could extinguish it. A flame that smoked indicated impurities in the wax or tallow. The color of the flame could tell you about the quality of your fuel. The pure white of good spermaceti, the yellow of beeswax, the reddish tinge of poor quality tallow. There were superstitions and beliefs surrounding flames. A candle that burned with a blue flame was said to indicate the presence of spirits. A flame that suddenly went out when there was no draught was an omen of death. Candles were lit for the dying, to light their way to the next world, and kept burning for a day after death to ensure the soul's safe passage. Throughout history, the lighting and extinguishing of flames created the rhythm of daily life. These rituals, performed millions of times by countless generations, shape the very structure of human society. Let us explore these gentle ceremonies that mark the boundaries between day and night. In a typical English farmhouse of the 17th century, the day's relationship with artificial light began before dawn. The housewife would rise first, in complete darkness. By touch alone, she would find the tinderbox, that essential tool of pre-match civilization. Inside would be a piece of steel, a chunk of flint, and a small amount of char cloth, linen that had been heated without oxygen until it became black and would catch the tiniest spark. The process of striking light was neither quick nor certain. She would strike the steel against the flint, sending sparks flying. Most would die instantly in the cold air. But with patience and skill, one spark would catch on the char cloth, creating a tiny glowing ember. This would be carefully transferred to a sulfur-tipped splint, which would burst into flame. From this single flame, a rushlight or candle would be lit, and from that, the morning fire would be kindled. As evening approached, different households had different traditions. In wealthy homes, the lighting of candles might be ceremonial. The butler or head footman would enter each room at a prescribed time, lighting candles in a specific order. In middle-class homes, the family might gather as darkness fell, and the lighting of the evening candle or lamp would signal the transition from the work of the day to the leisure of evening. Children grew up with these rhythms embedded in their consciousness. They learned to value light, to never waste it. The command to not burn the candle at both ends wasn't just metaphorical advice about overwork. It referred to the wasteful practice of lighting both ends of a candle to get more light. which would use it up twice as fast. The extinguishing of lights was equally ritualistic. In many households, the father would make the rounds, checking that all flames were safely out. Candles would be extinguished with a snuffer, never blown out, as that could scatter hot wax. Oil lamps would have their wicks turned down until the flame died. The last act before bed would be to bank the fire, covering the coals with ashes to keep them alive but safe through the night. Sleep patterns themselves were different in the pre-electric era. Historical evidence suggests many people practiced segmented sleep, sleeping in two distinct periods with a wakeful interval in between, called first sleep and second sleep, with the time between used for prayer, contemplation, conversation, or intimate activities. Light, throughout most of human history, was a marker of social status. The type of light you could afford, the amount you could burn, and when you could burn it, all spoke volumes about your place in society. This hierarchy of illumination shaped social interactions, economic relationships, and even architecture. At the bottom of the social ladder, the poorest members of society often had no artificial light at all. In medieval England, the truly destitute might spend their winter evenings in complete darkness, going to bed as soon as the sun set, because they couldn't afford even a rushlight. Their hovels had small windows or none at all. Glass was expensive, and larger openings meant more heat loss. They lived by the rhythm of the sun absolutely, their winter days compressed to just 8 hours of dim daylight. Moving up slightly, agricultural labourers might have rushlights or the occasional tallow candle. But these were precious, saved for necessary tasks. Most evening activities, conversation, storytelling, singing, were done in the dim glow of the fire, if they had fuel for one. Children learned to navigate their homes in near total darkness, memorizing the location of every obstacle. The middling sort, craftsmen, small merchants, yeoman farmers, could afford regular use of candles. But even for them, light was carefully managed. A craftsman might use good light for detailed work that could earn money, but the family's leisure time would be spent in dimmer illumination. Accounts books from this period show that a typical middle-class household might spend 5% of their income on candles and lamp oil, equivalent to what a modern family might spend on all their utilities combined. The wealthy, of course, lived in a different world of light entirely. A grand estate might burn through hundreds of pounds of wax in a single winter month. The ability to turn night into day was a display of grain and wealth as impressive as gold plate or fine clothes. When the Earl of Northumberland entertained in 1750, his steward recorded the use of 400 pounds of wax candles for a single 3-day house party. This disparity in access to light had profound social implications. The wealthy could extend their productive and social hours deep into the night. They could read, study, conduct business, and socialize after dark. This gave them enormous advantages in education, commerce, and political influence. The poor, confined to darkness for 14 hours in winter, were effectively excluded from many aspects of economic and cultural life. Before electricity, working after dark was challenging, dangerous, and expensive. Yet certain occupations required nighttime labor, and the solutions developed for workplace lighting were often ingenious. These workers who labored by artificial light developed their own culture, their own traditions, and their own relationship with illumination. In the textile mills of 18th century England, the introduction of artificial lighting allowed for the extension of the working day that would fuel the Industrial Revolution. Early mills relied on hundreds of candles or oil lamps, each one a potential fire hazard, in rooms full of cotton fibers. Mill owners calculated the cost of lighting against the profit from extra hours of production. Workers, many of them children, labored in the dim, flickering light that strained their eyes and consumed what little oxygen existed in the poorly ventilated mills. The mining industry presented unique challenges. Naked flames in coal mines could ignite deadly explosions of methane gas, known as fire damp. Early miners used candles anyway, developing a folk wisdom about reading the flame for signs of bad air. A flame that burned blue indicated the presence of fire damp. A flame that grew dim warned of black damp, carbon dioxide that could suffocate. Miners would sometimes send a man wrapped in wet leather, carrying a long candle on a pole, to deliberately ignite small pockets of gas before they could build up to dangerous levels. The invention of the Davy lamp in 1815 revolutionized mining safety. This oil lamp, surrounded by a fine metal mesh, would burn safely even in the presence of methane. The mesh dissipated the heat of the flame, preventing it from igniting the surrounding gas. Miners learned to read these safety lamps like instruments. The height and color of the flame indicating the presence and concentration of various gases. Bakers, by necessity, worked through the night so that fresh bread would be ready for morning customers. A bakery at night was a cave of dancing shadows and glowing ovens. Bakers developed an acute sensitivity to light and shadow, able to judge the doneness of bread by the color it showed in the dim light of oil lamps. The head baker would arrive at 2 a.m, lighting the lamps in a specific order, each one positioned to illuminate a particular workstation without creating shadows that would interfere with the delicate work of shaping loaves. Night watchmen developed their own culture around light. Their lanterns were badges of office, carefully maintained and often personalized. A watchman's lantern needed to be bright enough to illuminate dark corners where criminals might hide, but not so bright as to ruin his night vision. Many watchmen preferred whale oil for its bright white light that could pierce fog and rain. They developed techniques for shielding and revealing their lights, using them to signal to other watchmen or to temporarily blind and disorient suspects. The printing industry, as it grew in importance, increasingly required night work to produce morning newspapers. Compositors setting type by candlelight developed extraordinary eyesight problems, but also remarkable skill. They learned to work by touch as much as sight, their fingers reading the reverse letters as they assembled them into words and sentences. The business of providing light was one of the most important economic sectors in pre-electrical society. From the individual rushlight maker to the great whaling companies, millions of people worldwide earned their living from humanity's need to push back the darkness. The economics of light influenced trade routes, international relations, and the development of early capitalism. Consider the global trade in wax and oils. Beeswax from Russia and Poland was shipped to Western Europe, where it commanded premium prices. The best olive oil for lamps came from the Mediterranean, creating trade networks that stretched from Syria to Spain. Whale oil drew ships to the far corners of the earth, from the Arctic to the South Pacific. The spice trade included camphor, used to scent candles and lamp oils, making light not just visible, but aromatic. The account books of chandlers provide fascinating insights into the economics of pre-modern lighting. A London chandler's ledger from 1750 shows the complex web of credit and debt that kept the business running. Churches were major customers but slow payers. Wealthy households bought on account, settling bills quarterly or even annually. The chandler, in turn, bought raw materials on credit from butchers for tallow, importers for wax, and rope makers for wicks. Price fluctuations could make or break a chandler's business. Wars disrupted the supply of beeswax from Eastern Europe, sending prices soaring. A failed olive harvest in the Mediterranean would raise the price of lamp oil across Europe. The discovery of spermaceti processing in the 1750s created new fortunes for those who mastered the technique first, while driving traditional chandlers toward bankruptcy. The rise of gas lighting in the 19th century triggered one of the first major technological disruptions in history. Whale oil merchants, who had invested fortunes in ships and processing facilities, watched their market disappear almost overnight. Chandlers, who had spent decades perfecting their craft, found themselves obsolete. Some adapted, becoming gas fitters or electrical suppliers. Many others simply disappeared, their skills no longer needed in the new world of piped illumination. Yet even as industrial lighting transformed cities, the rural market for traditional lighting remained strong. Travel accounts from the American frontier in the 1870s describe general stores where candles and lamp oil were as essential as flour and salt. Farmers might travel dozens of miles to trade produce for lighting supplies. The Sears Roebuck Catalogue of 1897 devoted several pages to lamps, candles, and related supplies, indicating a still thriving market for traditional lighting. The availability and quality of artificial light profoundly shaped human culture, influencing everything from literature and art to religion and philosophy. The metaphors of light and darkness permeate every human language, every religious tradition, every artistic movement. This is not coincidence, but rather the direct result of millennia spent in intimate relationship with controlled flame. In literature, the management of light often drove plot and character development. Shakespeare's plays are full of scenes that depend on the lighting technology of his era. In Macbeth, the murder of Duncan happens in darkness, with Lady Macbeth carrying a candle. A detail that would have immediately conveyed meaning to Elizabethan audiences who understood the expense and significance of burning a candle at night. The porter's comic speech about Hell's Gatekeeper takes on additional meaning when we realize he would have delivered it in the dim light of the theatre's candles, the audience straining to see his expressions in the flickering shadows. Religious practices evolved in harmony with available lighting. The Christian practice of vigils, staying awake through the night in prayer, was shaped by the rhythm of lamp oil and candle length. A vigil light was specifically one that could burn through the night, about 8 hours. The Islamic practice of praying 5 times daily, with the first prayer before dawn and the last after dusk, created a framework that acknowledged the boundaries of natural light while asserting human determination to maintain religious observance regardless of darkness. The Jewish tradition of the Sabbath lights, kindled before sunset on Friday, created a weekly ritual around illumination. The lights must be lit before the Sabbath begins, as creating fire is forbidden on the day of rest. The two candles represent the two commandments to remember and observe the Sabbath, but they also serve the practical purpose of providing light for the Sabbath meal, as no new flames could be kindled until Saturday evening. Visual artists developed techniques specifically for work by artificial light. Rembrandt's mastery of chiaroscuro, the dramatic interplay of light and dark, was informed by his observation of candlelit scenes. His paintings often seemed to glow with an inner light, recreating the experience of seeing faces and objects illuminated by flame. The French painter Georges de la Tour specialized in candlelit scenes, capturing the way a single flame could transform a mundane moment into something transcendent. The development of evening entertainment was constrained and shaped by lighting technology. Theatre performances in Shakespeare's time were held in the afternoon, using natural light. When indoor theatres began using artificial lighting, it changed the nature of performance. Actors had to learn to work with shadows, to find their light, to project their voices differently in the dimmer illumination. The invention of footlights, oil lamps or candles placed along the front of the stage, created the peculiar upward illumination that became synonymous with theatrical performance. As the 19th century drew to a close, the age of flame-based lighting entered its final chapter. The transition was neither smooth nor immediate. For decades, candles, oil lamps, gas and electricity coexisted, each serving different needs and markets. This period of overlap provides a unique window into how technological change actually happens. Not as a sudden replacement, but as a gradual, uneven transformation. In 1879, Thomas Edison's successful demonstration of the incandescent light bulb marked the beginning of the end for flame-based lighting, though few realized it at the time. The early electric lights were expensive, unreliable, and required infrastructure that didn't exist in most places. For the average person in 1880, electricity seemed no more practical than the gas lighting that had also once seemed revolutionary but remained limited to major cities and wealthy neighborhoods. Rural areas, in particular, clung to traditional lighting for decades after electricity became available in cities. Farm families in the American Midwest in the 1920s still made their own candles, maintained kerosene lamps, and organized their lives around the availability of natural light. The Rural Electrification Act of 1936 would finally bring electricity to most American farms. But even then, many families kept their oil lamps ready, not trusting the new technology. The last commercial candle makers who served the everyday lighting market, rather than the decorative or religious markets that survive today, offer poignant stories of technological displacement. The Price's Candle Company in London, founded in 1830, had grown to become the world's largest candle manufacturer by 1900, employing over 2,000 workers. As electric lighting spread, they desperately diversified, making bicycle lamps, night lights, and specialty candles. The main factory finally closed in 1966, though the company survives today making decorative candles, a shadow of its former industrial might. Personal accounts from this transitional period reveal the profound psychological impact of the change from flame to electric light. Writers complained that electric light was harsh, that it lacked the warmth and life of flame. There were health concerns. Doctors worried about the effect of bright electric light on eyes accustomed to the dimmer illumination of candles and oil lamps. Some religious figures argued that electric light was unnatural, that it violated the God-given boundary between day and night. Yet there were also those who embraced the change enthusiastically. Women's diaries from the era often celebrate the liberation from the constant work of maintaining lamps and candles. No more trimming wicks, cleaning glass chimneys, refilling oil reservoirs, or scraping wax drippings. The electric light switch seemed like magic. Instant, clean, bright light at the touch of a finger. The insurance industry played a significant role in the transition. Fire insurance companies offered lower premiums to businesses and homes that converted to electricity, recognizing the reduced fire risk. This economic incentive, as much as the convenience of electric light, drove adoption in many areas. By 1925, most American cities had ordinances restricting or prohibiting the use of open flames for lighting in public buildings. As we lie here in the gentle darkness, approaching sleep, let us consider what humanity lost when we gained the ability to banish darkness at will. This is not a lament for the past. Few would willingly return to the laborious, dangerous, and limited lighting of earlier eras. But understanding what changed when flame gave way to filament helps us understand ourselves and our relationship with both light and darkness. The quality of darkness itself has been transformed. Pre-electric darkness was absolute in a way that most modern people have never experienced. In that darkness, the smallest flame was significant. A single candle could be seen from miles away on a clear night. The stars, unobscured by light pollution, provided actual navigation. The Milky Way was not a barely visible smudge, but a bright river across the sky that cast shadows on moonless nights. With the loss of true darkness came the loss of certain kinds of community. When lighting was expensive and laborious, people gathered together in the evenings to share both light and warmth. The phrase, burning daylight, meaning to waste time, comes from an era when daylight was too precious for anything but productive work. Evening gatherings around a shared light source fostered storytelling, singing, and conversation in ways that our individually lit, device-focused evenings rarely match. The rhythm of life changed fundamentally. Without effective artificial light, humans lived more in harmony with natural circadian rhythms. Historical evidence shows people often went to bed shortly after sunset, round 8 or 9 o'clock, because extending the day with artificial light was expensive and laborious. The industrial work schedule, made possible by artificial lighting, divorced human activity from natural light cycles in ways that we're only now beginning to understand the health implications of. We lost, too, a certain attentiveness to light itself. When every flame had to be tended, monitored, and maintained, people developed an intimate awareness of light's behavior. They could read the health of a flame, predict weather changes from how their candles burned, judge time by the length of remaining candle. Light was not taken for granted, but was appreciated, valued, and carefully observed. The social hierarchies maintained by access to light dissolved, but so did some of the skills and knowledge that scarcity created. The ability to strike fire from flint and steel, to trim a wick for optimal burning, to make rushlights from gathered plants. These were once universal skills, passed from parent to child through countless generations. They connected humans directly to the material world, to the sources and sciences of their comfort and survival. Perhaps most significantly, we lost a certain relationship with time. Evening was once a gradual dimming, a gentle preparation for sleep. Morning came slowly, announced first by the graying of the eastern sky, then the gradual increase of natural light. Now we transition instantly from dark to light with a switch, our bodies given no time to adjust. The anxiety and sleep disorders that plague modern society may partly stem from this lost transition time, this absence of the gentle boundaries that flame-lit evenings once provided. Yet, even in our electrified age, the flame has not entirely disappeared from human life. Its persistence in certain contexts reveals something fundamental about human psychology and our deep, evolutionary connection to fire. The flames that remain serve purposes beyond mere illumination. They connect us to our past, comfort us in the present, and remind us of our essential humanity. Consider the birthday candle, that small ritual that connects us directly to ancient fire ceremonies. The practice of placing candles on cakes dates back at least to ancient Greece, where round cakes adorned with candles were offered to Artemis, goddess of the moon. The candles represented the glowing moon, and the smoke carried prayers to the gods. Today's child, making a wish and blowing out candles, unknowingly participates in a ritual thousands of years old. The romantic dinner by candlelight remains a powerful cultural symbol. Restaurant owners know that candle-lit tables encourage longer meals, more intimate conversation, and higher bills. The soft, warm light of candles is flattering to human faces in ways that electric light rarely matches. It creates a sphere of intimacy, separating the diners from the larger world. The flickering shadows add movement and life to what would otherwise be a static scene. Religious and spiritual practices worldwide maintain the sacred flame. From the eternal flames at memorials and tombs of unknown soldiers to the altar candles in churches, synagogues, and temples, fire continues to represent the divine, the eternal, the connection between earth and heaven. The act of lighting a candle for someone, whether in prayer, remembrance, or hope, provides a tangible action for intangible feelings. The fireplace, largely unnecessary for heating in modern homes with central heating, remains a desired feature. The gas fireplaces that have replaced wood-burning ones often include artificial logs and even speakers that crackle, attempting to recreate not just the visual, but the auditory experience of a wood fire. This suggests that our attraction to flame goes beyond the practical or even the visual. It encompasses a full sensory experience that speaks to something deep in our evolutionary history. During power outages, candles and oil lamps emerge from drawers and closets where they wait like patient servants. In these moments, we briefly return to the world of our ancestors. Families gather in the circle of light, shadows dance on walls, and the pace of life slows to match the gentle rhythm of the flame. These experiences often become memorable, even treasured, suggesting that something in us misses the flame-lit world, even as we would not choose to return to it permanently. The camping experience deliberately recreates elements of pre-electric life, with the campfire as its central feature. People who would never choose to live without electricity will travel great distances and pay significant money to sit around a fire, cook over flames, and sleep in the darkness broken only by firelight. The campfire experience. The stories told, the marshmallows roasted, the quiet contemplation of dancing flames provides something that our electrified lives lack. As we prepare to conclude our gentle journey through the history of light, it's fitting to consider how artificial illumination has shaped that most fundamental human activity. Sleep itself. The relationship between light and sleep once governed entirely by the sun's rhythm, has become one of the most complex challenges of modern life. Our ancestors' sleep patterns were profoundly different from our own. Before artificial lighting, people often practiced segmented sleep, waking naturally in the middle of the night for an hour or more of quiet activity before returning to their second sleep. This pattern, which seems strange to us now, may have been the natural human sleep pattern for most of our species' existence. The invention of artificial light didn't immediately change sleep patterns. Candles and oil lamps were too expensive for most people to significantly extend their waking hours. But as lighting became cheaper and brighter, humans began what some researchers call the Great Sleep Recession. Where our ancestors might have spent 12 hours in bed during winter nights, modern humans average less than 7 hours of sleep year-round. The quality of our sleep has changed as well. The full darkness that once signaled to our bodies that it was time to rest is increasingly rare. Even in our bedrooms, LED lights from devices, street lights filtering through windows, and the general sky glow of urban areas mean that we rarely experience true darkness. Our pineal glands, evolved to produce melatonin in response to darkness, struggle to function properly in our permanently illuminated environment. Yet understanding this history offers paths toward better sleep. The growing awareness of sleep hygiene often involves recreating aspects of pre-electric bedtime routines. Dimming lights in the evening, avoiding screens before bed, using candles or soft lamplight to signal the approaching night. These practices unconsciously recreate the gradual transition from light to dark that our ancestors experienced naturally. Some sleep researchers have experimented with pre-industrial lighting conditions, and the results are remarkable. Subjects exposed only to natural light and flame-based lighting for several weeks often spontaneously return to segmented sleep patterns. They report more vivid dreams, better mood regulation, and a feeling of being more in tune with their body's natural rhythms. As our story draws to a close, let us imagine ourselves as that last generation of Chandlers, watching the electric age dawn. They had spent their lives in intimate relationship with flame, understanding its moods, its needs, its gifts, and its dangers. They had inherited knowledge passed down through countless generations, only to see it become obsolete in their own lifetimes. Yet perhaps they understood something we might learn from. They knew that light was precious, that darkness had its own value, that the rhythm of lighting and extinguishing flames gave structure and meaning to daily life. They experienced the satisfaction of creating light with their own hands, of maintaining and tending flames that required their attention and skill. The candle makers of the past were not just manufacturers, but were keepers of an ancient compact between humanity and fire. Every candle they made was a small victory against the darkness. A few hours of extended life stolen from the night. They understood light as a finite resource, something to be created, conserved, and valued. In our age of instant, infinite electrical illumination, we might benefit from occasionally remembering the flame. Not from nostalgia, but from an understanding that our relationship with light shapes our relationship with time, with each other, and with the natural world. The history of artificial light is not just a tale of technological progress, but a story of human adaptation, creativity, and the endless quest to push back the boundaries of our existence. When next you light a candle, perhaps for dinner, perhaps for ambiance, perhaps in remembrance, take a moment to appreciate the weight of history in that simple act. You are participating in a ritual as old as humanity itself, creating light from fuel and fire, just as your ancestors did for hundreds of thousands of years. The flame that dances before you is essentially the same phenomenon that lit the caves of Lascaux, the temples of Egypt, the halls of medieval castles, and the homes of your own great-grandparents. And so, dear listener, we come to the end of our journey through the gentle history of light. We have walked through caves lit by animal fat lamps, stood in the workshops of medieval chandlers, sailed with the whalers who hunted light across the world's oceans, and watched the last flames give way to electric filaments. As you lie there in your bed, surrounded by the subtle electrical hum of modern life, perhaps you can imagine yourself in another time. Picture yourself in a medieval chamber. The last candle burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Or in a colonial American farmhouse, the fire banked for the night, darkness settling over the household like a familiar blanket. Or perhaps, in a Roman villa, the oil lamps extinguished one by careful servants, each flame's death bringing the household closer to sleep. The story of light is the story of humanity itself. Our fears and ingenuity, our social structures and daily rituals, our relationship with the natural world, and our determination to transcend its limitations. Every advance in lighting technology changed not just how we saw the world, but how we lived in it, how we related to each other, how we structured our days and nights. In our modern world, where darkness is increasingly rare and artificial light increasingly powerful, we might sometimes forget the miracle that light represents. But the history we've explored tonight reminds us that illumination, whether from a rushlight or an LED, is one of humanity's greatest achievements, a triumph of ingenuity and persistence over the vast darkness that once ruled half of every day. May your dreams tonight be lit by the gentle glow of all the flames that came before. The watch fires of ancient hunters, the oil lamps of scholars, the candles of lovers, the whale oil lights of readers, all the small brave flames that pushed back the darkness and made us who we are. Rest well and remember, even in our electrified age, we remain the children of those who tended flames, who valued light, who understood darkness, and who passed down to us the precious gift of illumination. The flame may flicker and dim, but it never truly dies. It lives on in our electric lights, in our memories, in our dreams, and in the small rituals of light that still mark our most important moments. Good night and gentle dreams.